The gray pickup truck idled quietly under the dim glow of the street lamp on Meridian Street in Wilmington, North Carolina. It was 8:17 p.m., and Ethan Cole sat motionless behind the wheel, his hands resting on his thighs, his eyes fixed through the windshield on the large window of Harlow's Bistro across the road. His heart pounded too hard for something he'd told himself he shouldn't be doing. 3 years ago, Ethan had buried his wife Laura. A sudden brain hemorrhage, fast and merciless, had stolen the woman who'd been laughing with him in the kitchen that very morning. Since then, he'd become a single dad to their daughter Lily, now 7 years old. He'd learned to braid hair from online videos, pack school lunches that weren't just sandwiches, and answer questions no father should have to face like, "Does mom still see me in her dreams?" He kept going. Not because he wanted to, but because Lily needed him. And then there was Mia. Mia Carter was the widow of Nate Carter, Ethan's best friend since they were 15. Nate had died in a car accident 3 years ago, just months after Laura. His death had been another gut punch in a life already torn apart. After the funeral, Ethan had promised himself he wouldn't be one of those people who showed up for the grief and then faded away. He'd stopped by Mia's place to fix things around the house, replace light bulbs, check the porch railing, drop off soup when she was sick. At first it was all straightforward, just kindness between two survivors. But some feelings didn't arrive with a bang. They crept in during quiet afternoons, lingered in conversations, settled in glances that lasted a second too long. Tonight, Mia was on a blind date. It had been Paula's idea, her friend pushing her to get back out there. Ethan had swung by Mia's house earlier that evening to return the drill he'd borrowed the week before. He'd found her in the kitchen wearing a deep blue dress, her hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. She looked beautiful, but her eyes didn't. They were too still, like she'd already decided the night wouldn't lead anywhere. He'd joked that if she needed an excuse to bail early, he'd text her with a fake family emergency. Mia had smiled, but it hadn't reached her eyes. He'd gone home, tried to forget it, tried to sit with Lily as she colored, help her sound out words in her bedtime story. But by 8:05 p.m., with Lily asleep and the small apartment silent, Ethan had grabbed his keys. He told himself he was just going for a drive to clear his head. 12 minutes later, he was parked across from Harlow's Bistro. Through the window, he could see Mia at a table in the middle of the restaurant. Her back was straight, hands folded on the table face, composed in that way she had when she was holding everything together. The man across from her, Robert, according to what Paula had mentioned, stood up. He didn't lean in to apologize, didn't linger with any explanation. He just tossed some cash on the table and walked out like he'd finished a chore he didn't care about. Mia didn't move right away. She just stared at the empty chair. Then she lowered her head slightly. That was the moment Ethan opened his truck door. He crossed the street, pushed through the bistro's glass door, and walked straight to her table. Mia looked up, her eyes widening as he pulled out the chair and sat down across from her. "Ethan," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" He glanced at the empty seat, then at her shoulders, tense as if she were bracing for more disappointment. "I told you," he said, his voice low and steady. "If you needed a way out, I'd be there." Mia stared at him for a few seconds. Then something in her face cracked, not pain, but relief. A real smile broke through. A genuine laugh followed. And as Ethan signaled the waiter for 2 coffees, he knew deep in his chest that this night was going to change everything. The bistro was cozy with soft lighting and the hum of quiet conversations around them. The waiter brought their drinks without a word, sensing perhaps that this wasn't a typical table. Mia cradled her cup like it was warming her hands, and Ethan stirred his slowly buying time to steady himself. They didn't talk about Robert. There was no need. Instead, Ethan started with something safe, the construction site he was working on up north of the city. The previous crew left the framing all messed up, he said. Took me 2 weeks just to straighten it out. Feels like I'm rebuilding from scratch sometimes. Mia listened the way she always did, attentively, without interrupting, asking questions that showed she was really paying attention. Did you have to pull the whole thing down, or could you salvage parts? Her interest made him feel like what he said mattered. It always had. But tonight it hit different. In return, she talked about the preservation project she was fundraising for an old building downtown with history etched into its bricks. Her eyes lit up a little when she described the original architecture. Ethan had noticed that before, but now he couldn't look away. 2 hours passed like minutes. When they finally stepped outside, Meridian Street had quieted. The autumn wind brushed against his collar, carrying a chill. They walked slowly toward the parking lot, neither seeming eager to end the evening. Mia stopped under a street lamp. "Ethan," she said. He turned. The golden light caught one side of her face, softening her sharp features. "You didn't just happen to drive by here, did you?" It wasn't really a question. She already knew. Ethan could have lied, could have laughed it off and changed the subject. He'd gotten good at that, hiding behind practical kindness, renaming feelings he wasn't ready to face. But tonight he was tired of it. Tired of pretending that leaving her house didn't leave him thinking about her on the drive home. Tired of acting like her smiles were ordinary. Tired of reminding himself that what was growing between them was just closeness born from loss. So he told the truth. He'd driven over, because after leaving her house earlier that evening he couldn't sit still. The image of her in the kitchen, standing there in that blue dress with eyes that accepted disappointment before it even happened, had stuck with him. He'd paced the apartment, helped Lily with her reading, but his mind kept drifting back to Mia sitting across from some guy who probably didn't see her at all. "I couldn't stand the thought of you sitting there with someone who didn't know how to see you," Ethan said. "Someone who didn't deserve the time." Mia was quiet for a long moment. Not the cold kind of quiet, but the kind where someone was facing something they'd known was there but hadn't named yet. Then she reached across the table and touched his hand. Lightly, steadily, like it was the most natural thing. "I felt it changing too," she said, her eyes meeting his. "For a while now." Ethan swallowed his throat tight. "And you're scared?" he asked. She nodded slightly. "Scared, not of you, of everything around it." She talked about Nate, about the memories that still lingered like shadows in quiet rooms, about how some people wouldn't see two people trying to live again, they'd see the old connections and judge. She mentioned the whispers, the looks, the questions that didn't need malice to hurt. Sometimes she said people didn't have to be cruel on purpose. They just felt entitled to opinions. Ethan listened to all of it. Then he told her he wasn't asking for a decision tonight. He just didn't want to keep pretending there was nothing between them. Mia squeezed his hand a little tighter. "I don't have an answer right this second," she admitted. "I don't need one right this second," he replied. They sat like that for a few more seconds under the street lamp, the wind picking up just enough to rustle the leaves overhead. Then Mia let go, but not completely. She stepped back just far enough to look at him clearly. "Thank you for coming in tonight," she said. "If you hadn't, I think I would have gone home and locked it all up again." Ethan looked at her, a mix of ache and warmth spreading through his chest. "I don't want you locking anything up anymore." Mia smiled. This time it reached her eyes fully. As Ethan drove back to his small apartment, the radio off and the windows rolled up tight, the city had gone quiet. He thought about Lily asleep in her room, about Nate and Laura, about what people owed the dead, and what the living still had a right to claim for themselves. Some feelings came like water flowing under ice. You didn't see it right away, but once it started moving, there was no way to make it stand still again. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of Lily giggling in the kitchen, pouring cereal into a bowl that was way too big for her. He smiled, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and joined her at the table. "Did you have fun last night, Dad?" she asked, milk dribbling down her chin. He paused, then nodded. "Yeah, kiddo. I did." The days after that didn't bring any dramatic shifts, the kind outsiders might notice right away. Ethan still dropped Lily off at school each morning, headed to the construction site, came home to make simple dinners, and sat beside her while she read aloud, gently correcting mispronounced words. Mia still worked on her community preservation group, still shopped at Morton's on Saturday afternoons, still texted him short messages like, "Did you know this old tile is from 1948? Or does Lily still like peanut butter cookies?" But between them, the pretense was gone. No one named it out loud. But Ethan didn't pull back anymore when he caught himself looking at her a beat too long. Mia didn't avert her eyes like before. Their conversations flowed easier. Their laughs came quicker. Even Lily picked up on it. For the first time that night, her shoulders relaxed a fraction. Then she asked the question he knew was coming sooner or later. Where do you really see this going, Ethan? Not weeks, not months, long term. The restaurant hummed around them, clinking glasses, an old jazz tune drifting from the speakers. But Ethan only heard that, and he knew if there was ever a moment to lay it all out, this was it. One evening, as Ethan sliced apples for her after-school snack, Lily sat at the table with her crayons, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Do you like Mia, Dad?" she asked out of nowhere. The knife hovered mid-slice. "What makes you say that?" She shrugged, not looking up from her drawing. "Because when you text her, you smile. You don't smile like that when you text Mr. Larry from work." Ethan chuckled, even as something tugged in his chest. "You notice too much for a 7-year-old. "I'm 7, she said matter-of-factly, switching crayons. "Not 3. He set the plate in front of her and ruffled her hair. "If you like her, it's okay," Lily added, munching on a slice. "As long as she likes me, too." Ethan pulled her into a quick hug. "She does, kiddo. A whole lot." But as things opened up, the whispers started creeping in. Paula was the first to strike. She'd spotted them at a small coffee shop up north of the city on a Sunday afternoon. They weren't doing anything noteworthy, just sitting across from each other, talking over steaming mugs like they had 100 times before. But for someone like Paula, who thrived on interpreting the ordinary, it was enough ammunition. She called Carol Nate's mom the woman who'd treated Ethan like a second son since their high school days. Mia told him about it on a Tuesday evening when he stopped by her place to fix a loose doorknob in the back room. She stood at the kitchen counter, cradling a glass of water that had gone lukewarm, her voice too steady, like she was forcing it not to crack. "Paula thinks she's doing everyone a service by raising the alarm early," Mia said, setting the glass down. "Like we're some issue that needs to be managed before it gets out of hand." Ethan paused with the screwdriver in hand, his jaw tightening. And Carol. She just listened. Mia let out a slow breath. "But I can tell this is only the beginning." She wasn't exaggerating. A week later, at a community fundraiser for the old building project, Philip, an old neighbor of Nate's from back in the day, caught sight of them standing a little too close while poring over blueprints. Ethan's arm had brushed Mia's as he pointed out a structural flaw in the design, nothing more. Philip didn't say a word right then. But the next day, a couple of mutual acquaintances gave Mia those sidelong glances, the kind that didn't need words to cut. By Friday night, Mia called him. Her voice on the phone was quiet, but there was an edge to it that made him grab his keys without asking twice. When he got there, she opened the door but skipped the usual greeting. That alone told him it had dug deeper than he'd anticipated. They drove to Ember, the small, warm spot on the east side that had become their unofficial refuge. The place was dimly lit with jazz humming in the background and the clink of silverware providing a soft rhythm. They'd barely settled into their booth when Mia dove in. "I've heard people talking about us." Ethan set his water glass down carefully. Who Philip? And probably more by now. She met his eyes directly. "He said we're inappropriate, that it feels uncomfortable, like we're disrespecting some unspoken rule." Ethan felt a flush of heat at the back of his neck, his hands clenching under the table, but he kept his tone even. "That's his hang-up," maybe Mia said. "But I don't want you bearing the cost of being with me, bearing the cost with the gossip, the way people start looking at you differently, having to justify your own life choices to strangers." Ethan studied her for a long moment, seeing the weight she was carrying not just from tonight, but from years of navigating loss under watchful eyes. Then he leaned forward. "The only real cost would be if I let something genuine fade away, because someone else thinks it's inconvenient." Mia fell silent, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. He pressed on his voice, dropping lower. "I'm not living to keep Philip content, or Paula, or anyone who needs the world to stay in their tidy lines." For the first time that evening, her shoulders eased just a bit. Then she asked the question he'd known was inevitable, the one that had been building since their talk under the street lamp. "Where do you really see this going, Ethan?" Not just weeks from now, not months. Long term. The restaurant's ambient noise faded into the background, the jazz, the conversations at nearby tables, the distant clatter from the kitchen. Ethan heard only that question echoing in his mind. And he realized if there was ever a time to bear it all without holding back, this was it. 3 years of surviving alone, of patching together a life for Lily, while burying his own wants had led him here. He thought about the quiet nights staring at the ceiling, the way loss had hollowed him out, and how Mia had started filling those spaces without even trying. He took a breath, ready to lay it out. At Ember, Ethan didn't hold back. He'd sidestepped so much in the last 3 years, the raw edges of grief, the memories that hit like waves in quiet moments, the nights lying awake listening to Lily shift in her sleep and thinking about Laura, about the yellow crib that had never held a baby. But across from Mia, in that dimly lit booth with the jazz murmuring and the weight of her question hanging between them, he knew he couldn't dodge anymore. He met her eyes steadily. "I see it going somewhere lasting," he said. "Not because I'm lonely, not because I'm trying to fill some void. I see it going to a place where I wake up every morning still wanting to be there. With you, with Lily, with a real life." Mia didn't move. Maybe she was waiting for him to soften it, to backpedal into safer words. But Ethan didn't. "I'm not sitting here because I want to see if this could be fun for a while," he continued. "I'm here because being around you makes me want to be a better version of myself, not to impress you, but because you make me feel like I'm worth it." Her eyes shimmered slightly. "Ethan, you asked honestly, so I'm answering honestly." He leaned forward a little. "You're not a short chapter for me. You're something I want to read all the way through, and I'm not planning to put it down." This time Mia looked down at her hands on the table. She breathed slowly, and Ethan could see the internal tug-of-war. Not because she didn't feel it, but because she knew the cost of feeling anything real. Finally, she looked up. "Okay," she said. Just one word. But in her voice there was no half-step back. Ethan almost didn't realize he'd been holding his breath. Mia reached across and brushed the back of his hand, a brief touch, but enough to settle everything churning in his chest. After that, they didn't circle back to Philip, didn't dwell on Paula, didn't dissect the gossip waiting outside. Instead, they ate slowly. Mia shared a funny story about her first attempt at risotto turning into a gluey mess. Ethan told her about Lily insisting on wearing her yellow raincoat even on sunny days because what if the clouds changed their mind? Mia laughed hard at that one. The sound made the couple at the next table smile too, and Ethan thought if the world had a problem with a woman like Mia laughing like that, then the world was the one that was wrong. When he drove her home, the truck pulling up to the curb in front of her small house with its wilting flower pots on the steps, Mia didn't get out right away. She turned to him. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not letting me talk myself out of this before it even starts." Ethan smiled faintly, but inside it ached a little. "I think you've gotten too used to backing down for other people's sake." Mia held his gaze a few seconds longer than usual. Then she opened the door, stepped out, shut it gently, and before turning away, she leaned down to the half-open window. "Tell Lily good night for me." "You can text her yourself," he said. Mia smiled. "Okay." That night, right at 9:12, his phone buzzed, just as he finished pulling the covers over Lily. A message from Mia. "Good night, Lily. Don't let your dad burn the cookies for breakfast again." Lily giggled when he read it aloud. "I like Mia," she declared, hugging her stuffed bear close. "She gets you." Ethan sat on the edge of her bed for a while after she drifted off, watching the faint streetlight filter through the blinds. He thought about what had just shifted, not with a big kiss or a dramatic promise, just with an honest answer and a quiet okay from the woman across the table. 10 days later, Carol called. Ethan was out on the apartment balcony when his phone rang, the evening air cool against his skin. He'd been expecting this call or something like it more than he wanted to admit. Her voice on the other end was calmer than he'd braced for. "Do you have something you want to tell me, Ethan?" He paused for 2 seconds. Then he told the truth. No hedging, no dodging. that he and Mia were figuring out what this could be, that he hadn't stepped into it out of pity, or to patch over Nate, or Laura's absence. What he felt for Mia was present tense, not a shadow of the past. Carol was silent for a long stretch. Ethan stared down at the street below, watching a bus crawl through the intersection, feeling the wind rattle the iron railing. Then she spoke, her voice soft but firm. Nate trusted you more than just about anyone. If you've been there for Mia all these years and you're still showing up, I don't think this is some impulse. Ethan closed his eyes. She added, quieter now, it won't be easy, but not everything right is. When the call ended, Ethan stood there a while longer. He knew it wasn't over. People would still talk. There'd be more awkward glances, more cheap assumptions. But now, he wasn't facing it alone. Ethan carried the ring with him for 26 days, not in his jacket pocket or a desk drawer, but at the bottom of his black tool bag, the one he hauled to the site every morning, buried under blueprints, a box of nails, and an old tape measure. Maybe he stashed it there because it made the idea of proposing feel less terrifyingly romantic, less likely to make his hands shake. He hadn't bought it on a whim. He'd walked past 3 jewelry stores before stepping into a small one on Callum Street, where a silver-haired owner asked him just 2 questions before opening any cases. What kind of person is Mia? And what do you want her to feel when she looks at this ring every day? Ethan remembered answering without much hesitation that Mia was quiet strength, that she was beautiful in a way that didn't demand attention, that she deserved something that felt like it had always been hers. The woman nodded, disappeared into the back, and returned with a simple ring that was perfect in its understatement. He bought it that day. One Sunday afternoon started without any plans for it to be the day. It was mild with a light breeze carrying the scent of cut grass from neighboring yards. Mia had texted him that morning, painting the back porch trim today. Bring the right brushes. Don't argue. He'd laughed in the kitchen while reading it, Lily eyeing him over her bowl of cereal. Is that Mia? She asked. Yeah, I knew it. They arrived at Mia's place just before noon. Lily was shuttled off to the neighbors to play with their 2 dogs, leaving Ethan and Mia to tackle the job. The afternoon unfolded in easy rhythm, dipping brushes into white paint, debating which sections needed a second coat, laughing, when Ethan ended up with a long streak of white down his sleeve without noticing. It was all so ordinary, so perfectly unremarkable. And that's what made Ethan realize he didn't need to wait for some grand moment. Sometimes real life was the thing worth holding on to most. When they finished, they rinsed the brushes, brewed coffee, and sat on the back steps watching the late sun slant across the yard. Mia told a story about finally convincing a reluctant restorer to join the old building project, her hands gesturing as she described his gruff reluctance giving way. The wind tugged a few strands loose from her pinned hair. There was a small smudge of paint on her left arm. Ethan thought he'd never seen her look more beautiful, not in dresses or under restaurant lights, just here being herself at ease and alive in an afternoon that didn't try to be anything more. He reached into the tool bag beside him. Mia. She turned. I've been carrying something around for a while now. And maybe this is the right time. He opened the small box. Mia didn't gasp, didn't burst into tears right away. The first thing in her eyes was recognition, like some part of her had been quietly waiting for this, but hadn't dared to ask for it. Ethan spoke slowly, no rehearsed speech, just what came from the gut. I didn't think my life would get to this point again. After Laura, after years of just getting through the days, I figured that part of me was done. But you showed up, not in a rush, not demanding anything. You were just there, and the more I'm around you, the more I want to be better, not to prove something, but because you make me feel like I'm worth it. He took a breath, his heart pounding hard enough to hurt. I'm not promising no hard days, but I promise you won't ever doubt that you're seen chosen and loved with a clear-eyed, steady kind of love. Mia Carter, will you marry me? Mia looked at the ring, then at him. Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't fall yet. She extended her left-hand fingers, trembling just a little. Yes, she said. Just one word. But this time Ethan heard a whole future in it. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Mia stared down at it as if confirming it was real. Then she laughed through the tears, leaning into his shoulder. Ethan wrapped his arm around her. The 2 coffee mugs cooled on the step. The sun dipped lower, but he'd never seen anything so clear. When Lily was brought back, she froze in the back doorway for a second, then her eyes went wide. "Oh my gosh," she whispered. "You did it, Dad." Mia laughed, wiping her eyes. "How'd you know I'm 7?" Lily said, hands on hips. "Not 3. The 3 of them laughed together. That evening, they called Carol first. Ethan had thought about this call more than he cared to admit, but her voice on the line paused only briefly before she said softly, "Nate would be happy for you too." Mia turned away at that, but Ethan saw her shoulders shake. He held her hand tighter. The following spring, they got married in Mia's backyard. Nothing big, nothing flashy. Just the people who'd stuck around through the hardest years, the ones who understood that love sometimes didn't come like lightning. It came like light returning after a too long winter. Lily walked ahead, scattering cream-colored petals down the short garden path, her face serious like she was on the most important mission of her life. When Mia appeared, Ethan forgot everyone else. She didn't look like she was trying to be the perfect bride. She was just Mia, the woman who'd walked through loss, through gossip, through fear, and still chose to open up one more time. In his vows, Ethan said, "I don't love you because you fill some empty space. I love you because with you, life doesn't feel empty anymore." Mia cried openly then. And when he saw Lily hug her after the ceremony, yelling that she could finally call her mom Mia, if it was okay, Ethan felt something he thought he'd lost the right to touch. Not just happiness, but life coming back. The kind that filled the quiet spaces, mended the broken ones, and promised more mornings worth waking for. They danced under string lights as the sun set Lily spinning between them. Carol watched from a chair, a small smile on her face. Philip and Paula weren't there, no one who needed explanations or approvals. Ethan held Mia close, her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for saying yes," he whispered. "Thank you for asking," she whispered back. In that moment, with the backyard fading into twilight and their small family whole, Ethan knew they'd made it. Through the whispers, the doubts, the past that wouldn't let go easily, they'd chosen each other, and that was enough. The ring on her finger caught the last light, simple and perfect. Just like them. She turned mid-sentence. "I've been carrying something for a while now," he said, voice low. "And maybe this is the right time." He opened the small box. Mia didn't gasp or burst into tears. The first thing in her eyes was recognition, as if some part of her had been quietly waiting for this without daring to ask. Ethan spoke slowly, no rehearsed speech, just what rose from his chest. "I didn't think I'd get here again," he said. "After Laura, after years of just getting by, I figured that part of me was done. But you didn't come crashing in. You were just there. And the more I'm around you, the more I want to be the best version of myself, not to impress you, but because you make me feel worthy of it." He took a breath, the ring glinting in the fading light. "I'm not promising no rough days," he continued, "but I promise you won't question being seen, chosen, loved with the kind that sticks. Mia Carter. Will you marry me?" She stared at the ring, then at him. Tears welled but held for a moment, her left hand extended, trembling slightly. "Yes," she said. One word, but it carried a future. Ethan slid the ring on her finger cool against his. It fit perfectly. Mia gazed at it as if confirming it was real, then laughed through the tears, leaning into him. He wrapped an arm around her, holding her close as the sun dipped lower. When Lily returned, she froze in the doorway, eyes wide. "Oh my gosh," she whispered. "You did it." Mia wiped her eyes, smiling. "How'd you know I'm 7, not 3? Lily said, hands on hips. "Can I call you Mom? Mia now." 3 laughs mingled in the backyard. That night they called Carol first. Ethan had turned this over in his mind more than he'd admit, but her voice on the line was gentle. "Nate would be happy for you both," she said quietly. Mia turned away, shoulders shaking, but Ethan held her hand tighter. Spring came, and with it their wedding in Mia's backyard. No grandeur, just the people who'd stuck through the hard years, understanding that love sometimes arrived like light after a long winter. Lily walked ahead, scattering cream petals down the grass aisle, her face solemn with importance. When Mia appeared, Ethan forgot everyone else. She wasn't trying to be a perfect bride. She was just Mia, the woman who'd walked through loss, whispers, fear, and chosen to open up again. In his vows, Ethan said, "I don't love you to fill empty spaces. I love you because with you life isn't empty anymore." Mia cried, then real and unashamed. And he watching Lily hug Mia afterward, shouting about finally having a mom. Mia felt something he'd thought lost forever. Not just happiness, but life returning, full, flawed, and his.